Okay, I promise I'm not naked walking through my house. I'm in a swimsuit. I'm about to go outside because when I feel like crap, I like to read in an inner tube and just sit outside. Only problem is, there we go. We found the glasses. The sunglasses are on. The door is open. Hello, summer. A lot of people ask me, Sydney, how do you read for pleasure? How do you read this for pleasure? And you know, that's a great question. Don't be upset if you can't read a book for enjoyment. That's not how God made you. Like, let me tell you, I can't do math for sheesh. Not at all. But that's because God made me like that. He made me like books. Maybe not this one, but we might find out. It's currently July, oh geez, I didn't look at the date. 16th? Something like that? Oof, it's the 13th. Okay, so it's the 13th of July. I'm in my inner tube, I have my book. All that I've read of this book so far is the introduction, and it's pretty depressing because it's talking about the life of Mary Shelley, like what went on with her. So she's like the queen of tragedy, my guy. Her parents died, her husband had another wife and an unborn child, and that wife drowned herself and the unborn child when she found out that Percy is his name. Ran off with Mary, and then Percy dies and Mary's left alone, and it's just like, oh my gosh. So I'm really excited to read something happy, possibly. So I'm just gonna go ahead and start reading now. Before you get to chapter 1, there are like 4 letters, I think. I'm on the 4th one currently, that the main character writes to his sister back in England. He's on a voyage. I'm sorry if the wind is super loud. He's on a voyage for like discovery or something. Like he wants to be a daredevil and do some fun stuff and get out into the world. And they get trapped in a patch of ice. Pool cleaner gets my book wet. I'm gonna get so mad. I don't want to. Anyways, so we're reading this 4th letter, and it turns out that as they're sailing, they see that there is a man walking around, like just a stranger who's stuck there. And so they sail over to him and get him on board. And the captain, who is our main character, is like, oh my gosh, what's up with this guy? Like, he has suffered so much and his limbs are deteriorating and he's like half frozen. And he's just like, this creature is so fascinating because he's so despairing and broken. But when you do even the simplest and most human of gestures and show kindness, his whole demeanor changes, and it's just like really nice. And I'm starting to see where the Frankenstein metaphor is coming in. I don't know how it's going to end up getting to Frankenstein, but we're going to find out. I'm going to keep reading. I should really be doing these updates on my camera, but I'm not going to take my camera out in the hot sun. So update, I am now on chapter 1, so all the letters are finished, and it turns out that the main character of this story is not the man writing these letters. It is the man that was frozen and that they took in on the ship, because now the brother who is writing the letters to his sister is writing down the frozen man's story of what happened to him because he wanted to discover things. The man who was frozen must have created Frankenstein, so now the writer who is writing the letters is writing out the story of the frozen man as he tells what happened to him. Update number whatever the heck we're on. I just finished chapter 1, and something I've noticed about the way she writes is that she likes to repeat herself. She likes to use the same big words. Like countenance is used so many times in this book. So if you see the word countenance and you don't know what it means, look it up, write it down, and know that every time she says countenance, it just means whatever the heck it means. She loves to restate her point in the same sentence. So don't think that she's trying to say something else. She's just repeating herself so that you can understand what's going on. We have found out that the main character's name is Victor, the frozen man from earlier. We are now back in the past, and his name is Victor. And chapter 1 tells about how his parents met. The daughter was a beggar when her mom died giving birth to her, and her father was a merchant, and then he became really poor. He got sick in the mind, and so his daughter took care of him. And once the father died, the daughter was grieving, and fortunately her father, who passed away, had a friend, and that friend came in and took the daughter back to his home to like take care of her, and then 2 years later he took that daughter and they became man and wife. And I know you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, that age gap is disgusting. It's actually okay because it talks about how they really loved each other. The husband was going to do everything in his power to make sure that she stays happy and protected and does not have to think about her suffering in the past. And so she gives birth to Victor, their eldest son, which is our main character. And it talks about how Victor is their sole, not reason to live, but their sole joy, like the biggest joy in their lives. Worships this child, loves him. It talks about how the mom wants a daughter, like she really wants a daughter, but she's still fine with her son. It's still the mother's passion to go back and help people because she wants to aid those that were in her similar position when she was younger. And so she goes to this villa where a peasant and his wife are, and they have a bunch of, I think 5 babies from whatever circumstances. One of them is at least their own, and then one is a little girl who the wife just falls in love with, not the peasant wife, but like Victor's mom. Victor's mom falls in love with this little girl because she isn't like the other babies there, and she's fair, and she's, drenched in poverty, and she just wants to like take care of this little girl, and they let her have the girl. And it talks about how the mom is like, Victor, I have a present for you. You'll get it tomorrow. And it's their new child. And though Victor doesn't say that she is his sister, he calls her his more than sister. He's not jealous at all. I know there's like a thing when new children come in, the oldest sibling feels threatened and unloved. It isn't like that because Victor is talking about how he is going to protect this girl, his more than sister, with his life, and that he's hers and hers alone, because from the beginning his mom was like, I have a gift for you. And so any success that Elizabeth, that's her name, Elizabeth has, he kind of takes it as his own, protects her, loves her, and I think it's just a precious relationship. I'm liking it so far. So it's been a while since I've checked in. First of all, I'm brown. Welcome back, brown hair. Second of all, I've read a lot of Frankenstein, but I was reading them in places where, I didn't really have the means to like give you an update, because everyone was like, Sydney, why are you talking to your phone in the middle of an airport delay? So I'm just going to briefly sum up what all I've read. First of all, it's bloody hot out here. I'm in Estes Park, Colorado, by the way, so if you hear birds chirping, I'm just in nature. I think the last time I talked with y'all, I was on chapter 1. So basically I've read through chapter 6. I'm on chapter 7 now, so that's a lot that I've passed by. So basically, Victor has grown up and is going to school in some kind of I word that's hard to pronounce. I don't know. And he is really caught up in natural philosophy, and he decides that because of all his background in wondering about life and the spiritual elements, he's going to try and animate someone to life, like out of raw materials. He spends over a year doing this. His health declines because he only works on it. He doesn't socialize, he doesn't go outside, he doesn't really eat, doesn't really rest. And finally, the monster is complete and jolts to life. And I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, where's the line that says it's alive, it's alive? Guess what, fans? It's not there. I know, I searched for it. And immediately once the monster is alive, fun fact, Frankenstein is not the monster. Frankenstein is the man who creates the monster. Frankenstein is Dr. Frankenstein. You learn something new every day. Frankenstein, upon creating this person, freaks out, regrets it, is just filled with misery and fear, and runs out and just leaves the monster. This new human being just kind of disappears. You don't see him. Like, we don't know where he is. Now, flash forward, we've had a couple chapters where everyone back home is missing Victor and sending him letters, and Clairville, Frankenstein's old friend, comes and nurses him back to health because he's just in such a decline from creating this human being who is now torturing his life, apparently. Clairville nurses him back to health with the condition that he needs to write his family, and he decides to do it, and he gets a letter from Elizabeth, his more than sister from the beginning, and then a letter from his dad, and his dad tells him that his youngest brother, William, is dead. He was murdered when they were out in the woods, and there are fingerprints from the murderer, as in like strangled to death. Now, I don't know much more than that. That's where I'm at right now, and I think that the creature killed William, whether for revenge or just lashed out or was out of control. I don't know. I think that the creature did it, so we'll see. All right, y'all, we back. I'm in a house crowded full of people, about 3 to a room, so I'm gonna try and hurry this along. Justine was the one who was suspicious of being the murderer of William, the little child who was strangled. And we do learn it was the monster, that she was completely innocent. She did nothing wrong, she did not kill the child, she loved the child, and yet she confessed to murdering him. Like, all that's gonna do, honey, is get you killed. At the trial, Elizabeth tries to prove her innocence and her character, and I guess the jury and the judge are like, haha, nah, sister, she gonna die. And that's what happens. She gets thrown in jail, and the next day, after having a long discussion with Frankenstein and Elizabeth, she dies. There's a really great quote that Justine says when she's being held after the trial. She's talking about how she doesn't fear to die, that fear is past. And she says, God raises my weakness and gives me courage to endure the worst. And I don't know, I just like that. That could be personally applicable. It says that she dies on a scaffold. So she's either hung or beheaded or I don't know. I didn't quite catch that. So now the body count for Frankenstein's creation is 2. And knowing how tragic this author is, it's only gonna get raised up. Update. It's been a long time since I've actually like verbally updated y'all because I just didn't have the means to do that. I had plenty of time to read and do my time lapses, but I didn't have a chance to actually sit down and tell you what I've been reading, and I've been reading a lot. So yeah, let me talk about that real quick. I think the last time we spoke, I was about to start chapter 9. This is how much I've read since my last update with you. So Justine is dead. She took the fall for a murder she did not commit. Frankenstein feels super guilty, so he decides to up and leave his house and run off into the mountains and hide because he just feels really terrible, and you know, who could blame him because he's got 2 dead bodies on his head. It just talks about all the architecture and the beauty and how he can't see it because he's just so enveloped in despair. Yeah, he talks about going to the summit of Montanvert, I think is how you say it, Montanvert. It talks about how sometimes the nature can reflect his mental state because it talks about how the scene is terrifically desolate. It's lonely and sad, and I'm sorry, I just woke up and my voice is not cute. There's a poem in here. I don't know if he writes it or if it just relates. It starts, we rest. A dream has the power to poison sleep. We rise. One wandering thought pollutes the day. I think he's about to fall off the bandwagon because he's looking at the nature and he's like, my heart is swelling something with joy for the first time in a long time. And then he says, allow me this faint happiness or take me as your companion away from the joys of life. And you're thinking, okay, he's finally gonna be happy. Nah, it's gonna be option B. The next sentence. As I said this, I suddenly beheld the figure of a man at some distance advancing towards me with superhuman speed. He bounded over the crevices in the ice, among which I had walked with caution. His stature also as he approached seemed to exceed that of a man. The demon, the monster, the fiend, the creation is here. It's alive! It's alive! I'm sorry, I had to say it at least once because y'all fooled me with that. Basically, what's gonna happen now is really confusing. I had to like write this down so I can remember. The captain of the ship that you met at the very beginning is recording Frankenstein the scientist as he retells the monster's story, because the monster is like, can you please listen to me, try and understand where I'm coming from, I wasn't always like this. And so he's gonna tell a tale. So it's like 3 point of views in one story. Does that make any sense? Alright, so I'm going to try and sum up the story real quick. I need a name for this monster because I keep calling him Frankenstein, but the doctor is Frankenstein. I'll call him Nikolai because Nikolai sounds like a really, really evil name. Nikolai talks about how he was created or born, how it was dark and he was alone and he didn't know how it happened. He just jolted and then there he was, fully grown. He talks about how he learns lessons of life and education from a group of cottagers who are his human neighbors because he hides away in a hovel. He loves the sound of birds. He loves summer and spring, the warmer months. It makes him feel less cold and alone. He's literally the opposite of any good-natured thing. Talks about how he is sad too, just like Frankenstein. He laments, he weeps. He feels human emotion. He has human wants. He gets hungry, he gets thirsty, he gets cold. And then he learns about the cottagers. He learns about his neighbors. So there's an old man, a young guy, a young girl, and then an Arabian girl. DeLacy is the old man. Felix is the young man. Agatha is the young girl. And then Safi is the Arabian. And the history with that is Felix was super depressed. Nikolai kind of related with Felix on his sadness, but he didn't know why because they seemed happy. The family had fallen from riches to poverty when Felix bailed out a Turkish government criminal agitator person thing. And when he went to go bail him out, he realized that the Turk had a daughter, a really beautiful daughter, and just immediately was like, whoa. And so the Turk saw that and he was like, okay, if you bail me out, you can have my daughter's hand in marriage. And, he was just like, bet, 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 bet. So he bailed him out the day before his execution and they escaped and they go to Italy, I think. But then the government finds out that Felix did this and they hold Agatha and DeLacy in prison for 5 months, I believe. The result of their trial is that they lose all their riches and fortune. And when the Turk finds this out, he's like, okay, yeah, you're not gonna marry my daughter anymore. And at this time, Safi and Felix have been sending letters to each other. She's learning his language. They're falling in love. They actually really do cherish each other. So it's like, don't go, no. Felix has to go back home with his family. The Turk takes Safi away, and Safi is outraged. Let me tell you, this sounds like early bred feminism, and I am here for it. Safi is like, I'm not rolling with this, nah. So when her dad goes away and leaves her with a servant, she decides that she is going to find Felix. And she does. She finds him. And then that's why Felix gets happier. And then Nikolai is still talking. He talks about how he's learned he's not a pretty human being, that he's not normal. He finds Victor's diary in a lab coat pocket. And he reads about the dismay and the regret and the horror that he felt when he brought Nikolai to life. I sickened as I read, hateful day when I received life, accursed creator. Why did you form a monster so hideous that even you turned from me in disgust? Nikolai? What the? Anyways, Nikolai decides that he's going to go see the cottagers, and because he's been collecting firewood for them, providing for them because they are impoverished, and so he's going to go meet them and see if they can overlook his hideous outer self so that they can be his friend because he's really lonely. And the old man is blind. So he waits for everyone to leave the house except the blind man, and then is like, can I come in? And of course he lets him in, and he talks. He's like, I'm a traveler, I'm alone, I just need somewhere warm. He's like, who are you searching for? And Nikolai kind of puts it off until all the people come back to the house, and he's like, you are the people I'm looking for. The girls freak out. One of them faints, and then Felix goes outside, gets a stick, and starts beating Nikolai down. Now, if you know Nikolai, he could have snapped Felix like a twig. Did he? No. Why? Because he was heckin' heartbroken. All his dreams just got crushed. And he ran out of the cottage. So then the cottagers decide to move houses. Like, leave their cottage forever. And that is when the rage and revenge begins. Because all the friends that he's ever known leaves. And now he is completely alone. First thing he does is he sets the cottage on fire. Because he's gonna take his anger out on inanimate things. But then, he decides that he's going to take revenge on Frankenstein's family. He decides to track down wherever the heck it was that Victor is. Which, according to his journal, said something about Geneva. I think that's how you say it. So he starts moving towards there. And on the way, he sees a little girl. She falls into a stream and immediately jumps in, gets her, saves her. It says restores animation. Did this man give CPR to a little girl? Anyway, so he rescued her and her dad took her from him and then took his gun and shot him. Shot Nikolai. What? I saved a little human girl's life, and the reward I get for it is pain that shot through muscle and bone. Then he gets close to Geneva, or he gets there, and he sees a little boy all alone. And at first, he has a different idea. He's thinking, oh, I can take this little boy, educate him to be my friend, and I won't be alone anymore. So he swipes this little boy, and he starts screaming and crying. He's like, let me go, my papa's gonna punish you. And he's like, I'm not intending to hurt you. But then this kid decides to say, my papa's gonna punish you. My papa's Frankenstein. He won't let you take me. And Nikolai's just like, Frankenstein? You belong to my enemy. You're my first victim. And I think that he was still going to take William. Because he says he goes to silence him and wraps his hand around his neck. But he has superhuman strength. And so he kills him. Oof. And that moment kind of reminded me of, what's it called? Lenny and Curly's wife from Of Mice and Men. If you know, you know. Then he found the portrait of Caroline, William's mom, the original wife. And he's like, this woman is beautiful, but this could be a piece of evidence. So he takes it. And he goes to find somewhere to sleep for the night. And he finds Justine in a barn. Then he decides, wait, if she wakes up and she runs and she sees me, she could put the murder on my head. So he drops the portrait into her pocket and frames her. And that's how Justine dies. And the last thing he says is, all of this would be fixed if I wasn't so alone. I need a female companion, and you're gonna build it for me. I had completely forgotten that the Bride of Frankenstein was a thing. He gonna get a bride. And at first Victor's like, no torture will ever get me to consent to this project. You can kill me now. He consents. Long story short. And then I keep reading because Nikolai's like, when you finish my companion, hit me up. And then he leaves. Victor going home. And he's talking to his dad. And his dad's like, why are you so unhappy with society and life? Like, what's going on with you? And Victor's just kind of shrugging his shoulders. And the dad wants to make sure that it's not having to do with Elizabeth. You're like, what the heck? He loves Elizabeth. They're great siblings. I have always looked forward to your marriage with our dear Elizabeth. You are attached to each other from your earliest infancy. You perhaps regard her as your sister, without any wish that she might become your wife. Wife. Oh, and then he just replies to it, I never saw any woman who excited as Elizabeth does my warmest admiration and affection. My future hopes and prospects are entirely bound upon the expectation of our union. What? But he decides that he's not going to marry Elizabeth until he finishes the lady friend for Nikolai, but that he'll get married immediately when he returns. So then he travels, and Clerval is with him again, his friend, and he's heading back to school, about to start his project. And that's where I'm at. And let me tell you, this update was about 20 minutes long. So I am not going to make an update until I finish the book. You're just going to see some time lapses, if I make any. Sounds good? It better be, because that's what's going to happen. It's done. I finished it. Everyone dies. Everyone dies except the people on the boat at the beginning of the story. Ouch. Oh my gosh. That was depressing. So, long story short, Victor sees Nikolai in the window, smiling at him as he's working on his female friend. When he does that, he destroys the creature that he's in the middle of making, and he throws all the remnants into the sea. Well, Nikolai doesn't quite like that. So, Victor goes out to sea to rest in a boat. Nikolai kills Clerval. Victor's boat ends up coming back to some kind of land where he is suspected of a murder, which he doesn't know is Clerval yet, but he learns. He is sick for over 2 months. He's in jail. He's eventually released because, they had circumstantial evidence, but it wasn't any good. Victor's father visits him in jail and is like, I'm so sorry. And then somewhere in the middle of that, I don't remember where, Nikolai is like, I'm going to be with you on your wedding night. And so Victor just assumes that the monster is going to come and attack him on his wedding night. So they go back, plan the wedding with him and Elizabeth. They get married, And that night they're walking the grounds of a cottage, and he's like, okay, Elizabeth, go retire for the night, meaning Elizabeth, just go in the house. And he's waiting for the monster to show up and get him. You idiot! You idiot! Elizabeth screams, Nikolai got her. Nikolai wasn't after Victor. Nikolai was after Elizabeth. I'm so frustrated because, like, if you know that he's coming after your family, why would you leave Elizabeth alone? And then, just like 2 or 3 days after hearing the news of Elizabeth dying, his dad dies. Oh. Victor devotes his life to finding the monster because no one believes that the monster did all this. So he's devoting the rest of his life to find Nikolai. And in his searching, that is how Walton and the ship and Victor meet. I don't like this. Everyone's like, should we return to England? Walton writes his sister, whose name I just forget, and it's not really a vital piece of information anymore. He writes his sister, like, I believe this man, I believe Victor's stories, yada 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 yada. Victor's like, no, if you're on a mission to explore and voyage, you should really just keep going. And they're thinking, okay, they're moved by his speech, but then eventually they turn around. And just before they arrive, or just as they arrive to England, Victor dies. And you think it's over there. It's not! Walton hears a noise in his ship and goes to check on Victor's room. And Nikolai is there. Nikolai weeping. He tells the captain that he is so sorry that he was ever an instrument of evil. And that, like, he's crying over his dead creator. And Nikolai's just like, I can die now too. And he just walks into the darkness. And that's how it ends. I guess that's it for the video. That's my read-along. Maybe like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe down below. So that I can make more videos for more people who will watch. This is so dirty. Let me tell you, it was a great book. This is officially going to be the book that I write a capstone over. I was gonna do Tale of Two Cities. No. It was so good. It was slow at parts, but it was a good book. I really enjoyed it. I'm gonna give that a 4 out of 5 stars and recommend you read it with tissues. I need to get control on my emotions. Hopefully for my review, I'm gonna be like a little more chill. Probably not gonna happen though. Once more, my name is Sydney. I make new videos every Thursday. And until next time, bye!